Welcome to the Executive Function for All podcast, helping people improve their executive function skills and reach their goals. Brought to you by Untapped Learning. Have you ever been told that ADHD limits your career options? Meet Dane, a finance professional with ADHD and dyslexia. Dane proves that your interests, not your diagnosis, should shape your path. In this episode, Dane shares his journey from a smart but scattered middle schooler to a thriving accountant in a fast-paced and detail-oriented world. He dives into how developing executive function skills, building routines, and embracing his unique strengths turn challenges into advantages. Plus, hear how boxing, discipline, and a love for numbers fueled his transformation. Dane's story has a lot to offer. Let's begin. Most people associate this ADHD thing with the fact that your brain works different. They always talk about the creativity and that side of it. But you went the complete opposite route. You got really into numbers. You got good at finance. You're becoming an accountant.
Yeah, I think that there's a big misconception about what ADHD people are like. I'm an analytical person. A lot of my coworkers actually have ADHD and dyslexia. So it's not totally uncommon to see somebody with ADHD who's analytical, more into numbers, especially when you're focusing on one thing for so long. It's one specific kind of accounting or math that I'm doing. I'm doing tax accounting. So it's the same thing a lot of the time, but I like it, so it works for me.
That's ADHD in a nutshell. It's when you care about something, you get really good at that thing, right? It's this hyper-focus thing versus having to balance 6 or 7 different classes. So for you, that was numbers.
Numbers were always my big thing. So I always knew that I wanted to go down that road. I like arguing and stuff. So my mom always thought I was going to be a lawyer. But a big part of it for me was just, I have trouble just reading and staying interested.
So speaking of arguing, I had you as a middle school student. You were that student who had these flashes of brilliance. You were in math two grades ahead, and then you'd come into school someday. Half the days you were late. Maybe you'd have like one shoe on or something like that. Like you're just so smart and then scattered. How do you go from that smart and scattered middle school student versus what you are now?
Once you get confronted with the problems of being scattered, like, oh, I can't find my homework, which is a big part of it, this backpack. You start to realize, oh, these are problems that do make my life more challenging. And if I put in that little bit of extra effort, then I can avoid a lot of issues. And then, working with you and working here too helped me learn more about just implementing certain executive functions into my life, keeping a planner in my phone, using my calendar, trying to keep track of everything. Because if I don't write it down or have a reminder set, I'm going to forget about it.
You're a big Jocko Willink guy like me. It's his whole discipline equals freedom mindset.
Yeah.
So you said something back there, which you had a small routine that sounded like it took more time, but it opened up a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
And one example of that was just organizing your backpack every night.
Yeah, no, it's simple. I used to have a messy room. I try to keep it clean and everything just because it decreases my anxiety when I'm in a clean environment and just makes life easier. And it's all about, discipline, making your bed instead of leaving it. And then that helps you get your day going. Same thing with working out, It can be hard, especially when you're working a lot of hours to exercise. But, I work a busy tax season where I could be working like 65 hours a week. And, I might not be able to work out as much, but that's when you just drop down and do some push-ups when you need a break and try to figure it out and base it around that.
Going back to this discipline equals freedom, the first time I kind of introduced this topic with you, you were pretty against it. You're like, I don't want to do another thing like organize my backpack or organize my Google Drive. I don't have time for that. When did that start to shift in your mind that this was going to open up a lot of freedom for you?
Yeah, well, I think initially a lot of kids have a negative portrayal of discipline. When you think of discipline, like disciplinary school, or you think of other people disciplining you, I started to realize, self-discipline is really important because it's what helps make you into the person that you want to be. It helps you accomplish all the goals that you set for yourself.
What were these small disciplines that you put in?
A big one was working out. I think that's really important, especially because I would get stressed out a lot about school. So working out, just doing a quick one, like 30 minutes after school, would help me reset to do my homework.
I saw such a big transformation in you when you started boxing. It was like this switch. It was like attention got better, focus got better, anxiety came down. What did boxing do for your ADHD?
Yeah, I think the first thing that boxing did was it gave me more confidence. Like, if I can do this kind of workout, then this simple task of, doing my chores is almost not relevant anymore. And then same thing with trying to focus. If I can get through a 30-minute, really hard, intense boxing workout, then the same thing for homework shouldn't be as hard. I just have to get through it, and I can take breaks. And another thing is the anxiety piece. A lot of people think that boxing would be stressful, and it can be when you're competing.
Punch in the face.
Yeah. But when you're actually just practicing, it's a really good way to relieve a lot of stress. It's hard to not let go of stress if you're punching a bag. It's a very kind of primal way to relieve stress, but for me, it's been a good one. I've tried things like meditating and that, but for me, the boxing was its own kind of meditation because you can't think.
We always talk about the attention getting better, the learning getting better, but the first thing you just said just now was that you felt more confident. How come you said something like that?
Yeah, well, initially I was in regular math classes, but I was in a dyslexic kind of reading group. So, while other kids went to go read in class, I got separated and went with a group of 6 kids. And some of them were my level, some of them were way more dyslexic than me. So you kind of get grouped with all these people and you feel like, you're not as good at something and you feel kind of like an outsider. So getting an extra boost of confidence helped me kind of come to realize everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses, and I don't really need to hyper focus on my weaknesses.
So I was in that group as well, and you do feel different. It's weird because teachers try to disguise it, and it's hard because as a teacher, you're trying to give the kid the help that they need, right? And you see the beautiful fish group, the high readers, the dolphins group over here, and I'm in the carp. They always pick an ugly fish of the group that I'm in, and you just start to internalize it, right? You feel like something's wrong when it's possibly not. You were always in advanced classes. What was it like being in advanced classes, but also having dyslexia?
Initially, it's kind of hard. You're definitely intimidated by how advanced everybody else seems. But then you start realizing, oh, my friend in this class is dyslexic, or my friend has ADHD. And that makes it a little bit better. But you do sometimes feel like a little bit of a delinquent, You're surrounded by people that study very often, very hard, are able to focus very well. And you're the one that, struggles a little bit more focusing. You're a little bit more hyper. You might talk a little bit more.
I was not in advanced classes. I know it's probably hard for you to believe, but I was not in many advanced classes. But I still remember being the last one to find a sheet of paper, the worksheet, the whatever. I couldn't fish that thing out of my trapper keeper.
Right.
I imagine in all these advanced classes, just with your profile, did stuff like that happen?
Yeah, no, it happened a lot. Maybe you forgot that a homework assignment was due on this date, or maybe, again, you're disorganized and you can't find it. Maybe, you had put it in a certain APA format and you totally didn't know that. Just making sure to communicate with the teacher. A lot of teachers, if they're aware of, you have ADHD or dyslexia, they ideally might, give you an extra day. The main thing is communicating that, but also learning organization skills, making sure that you're never going to lose a paper because you put it in this exact folder every time. You have one for turning in, one when it's done, and really just trying to get your organization skills grouped around making sure that you can't make those errors. For me, the big thing was a reminders list. Making a reminders list for every day. When is this homework due? Making sure to start homework 2 days ahead of time to try to give yourself time. And then if it's a big project, give yourself even more time. But that's the really kind of important stuff that you got to do to make sure that you get the assignments done on time and that you keep up with the other kids.
Well, and this is what I remember is the intellect and the understanding of the content was always there. But sometimes your teachers didn't know that because you couldn't turn stuff, because you forgot stuff or it was disorganized. So when we just focused really hard on the organizational piece, you were good on the content. And I think that's a huge misconception among teachers and adults. It's everyone thinks this kid needs to drop down a math class. Well, maybe they need to focus on the organization.
Right. When I saw my grades really turn around was once I started working on my organizational skills. I probably went from being a B minus C plus student, being more of a B plus A minus student.
So take me through that process of working on the organizational skills. Like, what did you try that worked or didn't work throughout this process?
I'd say the big thing, again, was just making sure to know due dates, know when I should start it even. So I wouldn't just write down when something's due. I would write down when I'm going to start working on that homework, because otherwise I could be like, oh, well, let's do like 2 days from now. I could just do it tomorrow. And then you end up procrastinating it. But if you kind of set that goal for yourself to start it then and there, you kind of feel like you're only cheating yourself. So holding yourself accountable through things like that. Another one was I try to completely organize my backpack. No more like sitting down for a test and being like, does anybody have lead for my mechanical pencil? Having a pocket for that. Just trying to keep everything clean and keeping it organized as you go, because organization isn't really about making things organized. That's like the annoying and smallest part of being organized, because if you organize and then just start shoving papers in your backpack again, you're disorganized again. So it's about maintaining organization and trying to maintain a routine. I'd say that's the biggest part is, organization and then making a routine.
How did you do that?
As far as routines, I would say making a daily routine was a really big part. So for me, I would go to school, I'd get back, look over like what I needed to do that day, work out. I take ADHD meds, so I would take those, work out, eat a quick snack, take like a 5-minute shower, and then get to work. And that all helped me get in the space where, okay, I've cleared my head. Now I can sit down and work pretty much stress-free.
Do you still do that, by the way?
Yeah. Well, I try to. It's definitely different. I'm no longer waking up at 7 and being done at 3, starting work at 9 and finishing at 5. But I still try to, at 5, take a little break, go on a walk outside, something like that before I start studying for the CPA or doing one of my online classes. Because going from 8 hours of accounting to 2.5 hours of accounting, you need a break somewhere in there other than just your lunch break. So it's really important. Know when you're starting to get mentally exhausted and take a break, because otherwise you're just going to waste your time, especially when you're studying for the CPA. The advice my coach gave me for the CPA was not to try to study like 7 hours each day of the weekend. A lot of people do that, but instead just try to do 30 minutes every day, because 30 minutes every day, it might be less time over the course of the week than, 7 hours over the weekend. But you're making sure that you memorize. It's like a language. You don't just learn a language by doing it all in like 1 week and only focusing on that. You learn a language by practicing over a long period of time.
Short-term to long-term memory.
Yeah.
Just quick, frequent study sessions.
Yeah.
It was pretty awesome to see your transformation from intelligent, scattered middle school boy to starting to really figure things out and have this self-assessment. You started to understand yourself and you started to stop fighting structure and more embracing it.
Yeah.
And then the way the world works is that once you get finally comfortable in middle school and high school, you got to be on your own.
Yeah.
Right? So when I met you, let's say you had, in middle school, you maybe had a little bit of an issue with video games. Just a small one.
Just a small one.
Do you still play video games?
Yeah, I still play video games. I mean, not every day, but yeah.
Something switched between you not being able to come off these video games. You're just getting flooded with dopamine.
Yeah.
And then do a math worksheet, right?
Right.
How did you figure this video game thing out?
The main thing is if you play video games, like when you still have stuff to do in the remainder of the day, you'll tell yourself that you're going to do that. And then you'll be like, one game, and then you'll play, and then be like, all right, well, I didn't win that one, so one more game. And then you'll keep playing, and then next thing you know, you don't have any time left to do the things you need to do.
Especially if you have ADHD, because you're just flooding your brain with dopamine, and then you got to come off that and do something that's not as exciting. It's
right.
Everything is working against you, because people get really hard on themselves but everything in your brain chemistry is working against you if you're trying to stop play video games and do work.
Yeah, well, and it can be the same thing again. I see it happen with people I know with like Instagram, where they start scrolling on Instagram and then it's 3 hours later. So the main thing is those are distractions. Just try not to let those get you when you still have stuff to do. Because it also feels better to play video games when you know like, oh, I don't have anything left to do. So I'm good. I don't need to stress about it.
Thank you for saying that, because the message here is play more video games. Play video games until your eyes bleed, but play them guilt-free. There's a different feeling. And when you figured that out, it's like, okay, I'm just going to do my stuff. And then I have all this freedom.
Well, and again, a huge reason is like I could play video games and have my mom yell at me every 10 minutes. Or I could play video games and not have my mom yell at me. I'll take the second one.
Yeah, and no parent wants to do that anyways.
Yeah.
Right? How did a skill like that transfer with you to college? Because you had to start taking high-level finance classes in college. What things did you do that kind of set you apart so you could get through college in a finance degree with ADHD and dyslexia?
I already had developed organization skills, but I had to even take that up like a level or two. With ADHD, you might not always think ahead about things. So one thing I made sure to do was know where my classes are, like before the first day when I have to go to the classes. That way I can actually get there, because college can be pretty complex to navigate compared to like a high school. It's multiple buildings. It's not just one school building. Also, emailing professors, like if you ever think that you need to contact your professor about anything, doing it and making sure it sounds good, making sure it's professional, making sure to go to office hours. Not even always if you necessarily need it, but just to show professors that you're engaged, especially in those classes where you think you're going to struggle the most. It's good to have a closer relationship with your professor, because if you're doing great in a class, you might like the professor a lot, but if you're already doing great, you don't need as much from that professor. It's good to have a relationship with a professor if you think you're going to struggle in a class.
Yeah, and you did such a good job structuring it. So this ADHD, dyslexia thing didn't work against you. It just, you had so much structure built in that I think that was just when you kind of figured that out and figured out you were actually saving time.
Yeah.
I think that's when I saw everything change for you.
Yeah. Well, and another thing is just adapting, doing whatever works for you, especially in college. However you want to study, go with that way. For me, it was using something like, if I had to remember something, using Quizlet. If, it was math, or an accounting class, making sure I know all the rules. I have a good note sheet, because writing notes for me helps put it in my brain. Some people like typing them. I like to handwrite them, even though it might take a little bit longer. So just knowing yourself and what works for you and making sure to do what works for you is really important. If you don't know that much about yourself and your own study habits, by the time you're in college, it can be a huge challenge. Another thing is, for me, I was never, going back to the dyslexia, when it comes to being given a textbook, that's a lot more challenging for me to really soak in the information. And it's a lot harder for me to focus on reading a textbook. So I would prioritize lecture notes and taking notes on those slideshows a little bit more than the book, especially just because my teachers would be able to highlight the important information. Still reading the book, but making sure to focus on slideshow notes for me was a big piece of it.
And I remember what you would do too is you would focus on that, but then you would always go to office hours and check in with the professor. Do I have the right things that I'm focusing on?
Yeah.
That does so many things. First of all, lets the professor know you care.
Right.
You're seen and you actually know what's coming because they see you working on that thing.
Yeah, I think in college, like as far as my relationship with, if I ever got like a slightly negative response, which I never really did, it would be because I'd send them an email. They'd send me like a kind of vague answer back and I'd be like, I need this clarified more clearly. That was never really a bad problem to have, because I want to make sure I understand everything fully. If I can take notes into the test, I want to make sure I utilize that and take advantage of everything that I'm able to.
So you start to figure out your brain, you get through college, and then now, in my opinion, from what I know, you have one of the most anti-ADHD jobs, and that's you're in tax accounting. Are there people with ADHD in accounting?
There are plenty. I mean, I work at a smaller firm. It's probably around like 60 or 70 people. And I would say that there are like 3 or 4 that I know of other than me with ADHD. Those numbers are above the regular percentage, probably.
Yeah, it's so funny because when you see things online, one of my biggest pet peeves is when you see things online that's like best jobs for people with ADHD. And they always mention like the same, like creative, marketing. And it's like the best job is what you're interested in. You're going to work your tail off and put in systems and routines around.
Yeah.
That's what interests you. There's a lot of attention to detail in that job.
Yeah.
So what do you have to do, or maybe things you've seen of other people who may have this ADHD thing? What is it that you guys do that maybe is a little different?
Just taking work breaks. You don't need to take a long work break, but a break can just be getting up, grabbing a coffee and a snack, and just looking out the window and stretching for a second. Things like that, because especially in the corporate world, you're sitting at a desk a lot. So it's good to just make sure to still get that blood pumping, make sure you're not sitting at your desk for 5 hours straight. But another thing is just you kind of have to retrain what you need to focus on. For me, the work isn't as much of the challenge. It's actually keeping track of like emails, because you're constantly getting emails and a client sent this info over. Now we need to check, okay, is this info good? Just making sure that you stay on top of, like, especially in tax, it's very quick. Especially like right now, we're near the end of extension season. So we have clients contacting us and we're contacting them back almost as quickly as we can because we need to get that return and we need to get that info as quickly as possible.
That seems like a lot of details. And the stereotype on people with ADHD is that we're not good with details.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true if you're interested in the thing. But do you have any special systems or have you seen anything to make sure you don't let these details slip through the cracks?
One thing I do is I just try to check my email like every 30 minutes to every hour. Try to check it consistently. And also I use sticky notes. So even though I can like make a note on my computer, it's good to literally make a note and put it on my computer. So if I get an email about, hey, I need to do this later today, I'll write it down on a sticky note, put it on my computer, and I'll make sure that I do that before I log off that day.
I love that because it's tactical. It's very much going back to what you talk about your strengths are. That's how you're not going to miss it. You know right away, I have to write it down.
Yeah.
And then I have to crumple it up and throw it away before I leave the office. It's very clear. It's black and white. It's not gray. And I think that's where we get lost in the details sometimes is when it becomes gray.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a common thing. I have friends that have ADHD and, they struggle with the same thing with their jobs. So it's just making sure because with the job, you're constantly getting told, hey, you need to work on this. Could you work on this? And if you don't, you kind of screwed up. So it's making sure that you get each and every one of those things done.
From the outside, it's hard for me to see like where ADHD would be a gift, being an accountant or in taxes at all. Is there a gift that lies in there somewhere?
I would say that part of the gift is just already having that practice of executive functioning skills in place that you can now apply to the job. Those kinds of skills are really important to apply to the job. And some people, they get in there and they might make the same mistake a lot, or they might not know that they made a mistake. But with me, if I make a mistake and then I get a review note on it, I try to write it down, make sure it's ingrained in my memory so I'm not doing that again. So it's more the executive functioning skills that I had to develop because I grew up with ADHD. I'd say those are the biggest benefit walking into like an accounting job.
That's interesting. So the fact that you were disorganized and you had to work really hard at this organization, it's almost as important as the math with how fast things are moving.
Yeah. I mean, you could have somebody without ADHD and they get through their whole life well enough without developing as many executive functioning skills. But I would say since I have ADHD, I already had to work on those executive functioning skills so much that it helped me have those ready for a career.
Are you okay with the fast pace?
Yeah. I actually kind of like it. In my job, there's really busy seasons. And it's like, get it out. We get info in the door. We try to get it out as quickly as possible with everything still being correct, obviously, because it's tax. But there's a lot of moving parts, I mean, they count down how many returns. We have 900 returns to do in a month. We have 600 to do in 3 weeks. So it's a lot going on, a lot of clients communicating with you while you're trying to do their returns. But I think those executive functioning skills kind of help you deal with that chaos.
You and I have talked about the hunter-farmer theory before. Some people believe that this ADHD brain evolved from hunters. And when you look at like what a great hunter was, is you put in a tremendous amount of effort for a short period of time, and then you got lazy and you didn't do anything for a couple of days, and then you put in another high amount of effort. That mentality eats you up in school.
Yeah.
Where you have to be very steady. But in your job, it's almost like that lines up well.
Yeah.
It's longer than days. It's for seasons, but going incredibly hard. And then you can come back and chill for a little bit.
Yeah, and I like it a lot because it's kind of nice to know, okay, I'm going to have to work really hard. I mean, and it's hard to work so many hours, but you kind of become more attuned to it. Once you start working some days like 10 to 11 hours, but then my summer is way better.
One of the things I'm always pushing back on is when I hear parents or adults say something like, you have this type of brain, I think you would struggle in a career like yours. What advice or what insights would you give to young people, families, parents, educators on going to a career that may not fit the stereotypical ADHD creative career?
Listen, everybody's very different. People have their own sets of skills. I don't really think ADHD should ever prevent somebody from going into what they want to go into. If I really wanted to be a lawyer, even though I'm dyslexic, I'd be a lawyer. ADHD impacts you, but it's not as important as what you want to do for a living. I mean, if you're good at something and you like it, then go for it. Even if you're mediocre, but you feel like you can grow a lot because you have a big passion for it, then you should go for it. The most important thing, I think, is really just how passionate you are about something and how much work you're willing to put into it. You're going to have to work harder probably than the next person, but if you're willing to work hard enough and you're willing to develop the organizational skills and develop the self-discipline to do it right and do it well, then you should go for it.
Dane, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Thank you for joining us on the Executive Function for All podcast. If today's episode brought you any value, please rate us 5 stars and share it with someone who may benefit. And remember, every small step you take builds towards your success. For resources and guidance, visit untappedlearning.com. Keep growing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.